Welcome back to the Cleveland Baseball Talk podcast. I'm Joe Noga, joined by Paul Hoynes. Hoynesy, it's one of those rare nights during the baseball season where there are no Major League Baseball games going on. Last night, the ESPYs were on, but if you found yourself sort of jonesing for a game to watch, you wound up watching a murder documentary like me and my wife did on the couch last night. I highly recommend the Long Island serial killer documentary on Netflix. Good one to go with. He has you on the edge of your seat for 3 hours there. But in lieu of recapping a game or looking ahead to any sort of Guardians series or Guardians action, if you were like me, you came across this list put out by Fox Sports yesterday after the All-Star game on the heels of their All-Star game broadcast success, which I think 7.2 million viewers. I think it was the biggest audience since 2017 for the All-Star game. So like we were saying yesterday during the podcast, they really, Major League Baseball and Fox really figured something out there with the format of the All-Star game, and a lot of people were tuning in and liking it. Great viewership for them. But Fox Sports decided to sort of capture that momentum and put out individual lists for all 30 teams of each team's all-time all-stars for position by position and managers. So they gave the all-time Guardians lineup, and I thought we would sit here and go through a position by position and just talk about each guy and then debate some of the honorable mentions, the names on the list that were sort of left off the starting group, and discuss which ones we thought maybe just deserved a second look there. This list for the Guardians, more so than a lot of the teams that are necessarily like original American League teams. This is a team that goes back to 1901. A lot of these guys on the Guardians starting list are more current, more within the last 30 to 40 years. What'd you think of the way that the list sort of skewed in terms of old guys versus young guys?
Yeah, Joe, I think I think you picked this. Must have been, I don't know how old this guy was who picked this list, but yeah, I think he may have forgotten like a big chunks of the Guardians slash Indians history there, but still a pretty good list. I think it was a fair representation of the talent that this organization has put on the field.
Yeah, for purposes of this list, I think I'm going to grant a dispensation on saying Indians or Guardians or where wherever you fall, wherever these players fell in the timeline. The majority of them, I think, fell in the Indians range. So feel free to just go ahead and use whichever team they played for under the name they played for. Let's start with probably the most obvious one, the name most associated for the longest time with this organization, with the Indians, the number one on the scorecard, number one at the ballpark. Hoynesy, the wall in left field is 19 feet high for a reason, and that reason is Bob Feller. This is pretty much no debating who was going to be the starting pitcher on this diamond when you look at this group. Bob Feller, the obvious choice there.
Yeah, no doubt about it, Joe. All-time leader, franchise leader in wins, complete games, innings pitched, you name it. Bob Feller owns it, and just an iconic player, a guy that spent all 18 years of his career in Cleveland. This was before free agency. Was joined the Navy and right after the outbreak of World War II. Lost almost 4 years in his prime. He told me once that he probably cost him 100 to 120 wins. So, yeah, it's got to be Rapid Robert.
Yeah, debuting in the big leagues at 17, all those things that make a guy an icon. Like you mentioned, the first thing I think of when I think of Bob Feller is that sacrifice that he made. That he was the first in line to go and sign up and join the military when World War II broke out. That was the Bob Feller Act of Valor Award is certainly a way that we remember him. But some of the other names on this list, the honorable mentions that were considered for starting pitcher, you're talking Bob Lemon, Mel Harder, Stan Kovaleski, Sam McDowell, Addie Joss, CC Sabathia. All these starting pitchers that were, all these guys are Hall of Famers, including CC, who's going in this year. As far as there is no lack of talent to choose from when you're picking, especially with this Cleveland organization, which has been known as just an incubator of pitching talent for so.
Yeah, no doubt about it, Joe. Kovaleski is an interesting guy to me. 1920, when they won the 1920 World Series, he went 3-0 in the World Series, Joe. He pitched I think, three straight complete games. This is a guy, he could throw. He was allowed to, that was when the spitball was grandfathered in. He threw the spitball and came out of the mines in Pennsylvania. Just an interesting guy. If you look at that 1920 World Series, his numbers kind of blow you away.
Yeah, and that's when the Hall of Fame resume sort of is built in the playoffs for a lot of these guys, and that's certainly the case for both Bob Feller and Stan Kovaleski. Let's go to the reliever slash closer, and like you said, recency bias is certainly the theme here on this list. Emmanuel Clase, the franchise's all-time leader in saves. He's just 27 years old. 1.8 1.0 ERA over 5 years. Strikeouts, games finished, 175 saves. This is when all is said and done, he's going to be among the leaders all time in several different categories as a relief pitcher. What did you think of choosing Emmanuel Clase over guys like Doug Jones, Cody Allen, the other honorable mentions here for relievers, Jose Mesa, and these are the other guy. The other honorable mention on this list was Andrew Miller, and I think Andrew Miller didn't necessarily play for a very long time, but he had a huge influence on this franchise in the time that he was here.
Yeah, the name that kind of jumps out of me, Joe. I've got no complaint with Clase being the all-time closer, but Jose Mesa really set the bar very, very high for, Cleveland closers in an era when, the game changed and bullpens became more prominent. In 95, this guy, was 45 for 46 in saves. I think he finished second in the MVP. Without Jose Mesa, they probably still win that division, but I don't think they win it by 100. They don't go 144. I mean, he was incredible, and he carried that over. And sustained that to in a career where he had 300 saves. So he had longevity, and Doug Jones ended up with over 300 saves too. So not with Cleveland necessarily, but we've got to see that kind of staying. We haven't seen that kind of staying power from Clase yet.
Yeah, and Doug Jones, the thing that stands out about Doug Jones, that changeup was, what did he pitch? Doug Jones pitched slower, and slowest.
Yeah, that's what Doc Edwards used to say.
And you knew what was coming, and you still couldn't hit it. It was amazing what Doug Jones was able to do. An all-star on some teams that were pretty rough. He was the lone all-star a few times. So yeah, Doug Jones, definitely one that came to mind, at least in my mind, when there was a debate between the two. But you can't argue the numbers when you go with Emmanuel Clase. Now, as far as going behind the plate and catching, the catcher position on this list put together by Fox, number one, Sandy Alomar Jr. Can't argue too much there because of not just the talent, and you saw firsthand when this guy came on just how good he was behind the plate, the strong arm, and he combined. He was a two-way player. He could hit the ball, and we saw him as hot as ever in '97 with the hitting streak there. Sandy Alomar gets the nod as the catcher. Other honorable mentions considered for the list at catcher would have been Victor Martinez and Steve O'Neill, who I'm not super familiar with, but I'm surprised that Victor, obviously he didn't catch for a super long time here in Cleveland, but he was the only other choice considered as an honorable mention there at catcher.
Yeah, I think they missed a big name there, Joe. Jim Hegan caught for
Yep.
14 years in Cleveland, caught the 48 World Series championship team, caught the 54 team that won 111 games, was the mastermind behind the plate for probably the greatest rotation in Cleveland history. This was a guy, I think probably overall the nod would go to Sandy, but Hegan is right there. You can't my father would roll over in his grave if I didn't mention Jim Hegan, because that's all I heard about with growing up as an Indians fan was about Jim Hegan. And 14 years he played with Cleveland, and he was the epitome of the kind of catch first, defense first catcher, random pitching staff, name to remember.
Yeah, definitely. I think when you're talking overall talent for the position and impact like Sandy had during those great playoff runs in the '90s for the Indians, I think you can't argue there. But Hegan was sort of like Cleveland's version of Yogi Berra. I mean, you think back, he was the guy behind the plate during all those great runs, like you said. And yeah, if you're the guy handling the staff that he had, the starting rotation that he had in front of him, your name's going to get mentioned in the all-time lists, I think, for sure. Let's jump over to first base, and I think there's a pretty obvious one there in the Hall of Famer. He played for 22 years, hit 612 home runs. The franchise leader in home runs, 7 for Jim Thome. This is a homegrown talent, a homegrown guy who went on to be a Hall of Famer. You don't see that very often in Cleveland, especially with position players. Thome gets the nod at first base ahead of Hal Trosky, who, I don't know, Hoynes, you probably covered him. It's been so long. But what did you think? It's a no-brainer for Jim Thome at first base.
Yeah, Thome, you've got to go with Thome. He started as a third baseman, converted to first base, and just, he did everything a first baseman does. You think of power at that position, you think of a home run hitter at that position, you think of a left-handed hitter at that position. He checked all the boxes.
Yeah, and this is a guy who started. He was drafted. He started his career as a shortstop. Could you picture Jim Thome as a shortstop? Not the Jim Thome that we all sort of close our eyes and picture hitting 520-foot home runs out of the ballpark. But he at one time he was a shortstop, and I find that incredibly hard to believe. But what are you going to do? Second base, one of the few old timers sort of on the list. And you're really not a guy who you think, started his career in Cleveland. Nap Lajoie, started in Philly, had him around for 13 years here in Cleveland, 39 average, 5 career batting titles, 4 of them came with Cleveland. This is a guy who, from what he was a player manager from 1905 to 1909. And when you look at that WAR statistic, that wins above replacement, he's an all-time leader in that category too. They picked Nap Lajoie at second base over a guy who I know you have a huge affinity for in Roberto Alomar. Alomar only played a few seasons at second base, but those seasons that he did play were incredible in Cleveland.
Yeah, I think Alomar's the best all-around player I've seen. Joe up close and personal for 3 years, but Lajoie played 13 years here. He was so good they named the team after him, Joe. They named before the Guardians, before the Indians, they were the Naps, and that's why they named them. And so I'll go with that.
Yeah, it's a pretty good indicator of how important you are to a team if they say, "Oh, we're this guy now." So yeah, we'll go with that. All right, this brings us to third base. And like we said, recency bias. And like we said, you can't argue with a lot of these because of the numbers and the importance. But Jose Ramirez, the obvious choice at third base. This is a 7-time All-Star. And by the time all is said and done, this guy is going to be at the top or near the top of every, not even the unimportant statistical categories like intentional walks. I mean, he's going to be the all-time leader at pretty much every statistical category on offense for the Guardians. But the other names considered: Ken Keltner, Al Rosen, Bill Bradley. These are all-timers as well. Every time you talk about Jose Ramirez moving up a chart or moving up a list, he's passing Ken Keltner, he's passing Al Rosen. These are the guys who did it for so long and for so many years before him. So just a sense of history when we keep writing these stories about Jose Ramirez and his march through the record books. Keltner, Rosen, Bradley, these are the guys who he's passing.
Yeah, no doubt about it, Joe. I mean, Jose's got to be the guy. And he's 280 lifetime hitter, 173 home runs. But Al Rosen has one thing that Jose has yet to win. In 1953, he was the AL MVP when he hit 43 home runs, 45 RBIs. But Rosen only played 10 years. That's probably held him back a little bit, but still a really, really good ball player that we shouldn't overlook. But Jose is Jose, switch hitter. We've seen him come up and transform himself into a guy that's headed to Cooperstown.
Yeah, and again, his story is unique, I think, among sort of some of these all-time guys that they found him, they discovered him, they developed him, they brought him along, and when he was first up in the major leagues, there was no indication that he was going to become a superstar, and then he just sort of took off in those magical years in 2016, 2017. It really became the player that he is. Also, Al Rosen didn't have Aaron Judge in front of him, I think, for a lot of those years. Jose Ramirez could have, I think, multiple MVP awards if guys like Aaron Judge weren't sort of his peers at the time. I think if you talked about in this era for Jose Ramirez, the MVP of the league, not named Aaron Judge, or take Aaron Judge out of the equation, I think Jose maybe wins the award once or twice.
Yeah, that's a good point, Joe. Very good point.
All right. So we look over at the shortstop position, and this is the one I think maybe there's a little debate here. Maybe there's you've seen both of these guys in their entire runs in Cleveland as far as on the field. Omar Vizquel gets the nod by Fox Sports, chooses Omar Vizquel as the all-time shortstop for Cleveland over guys at shortstop, including Francisco Lindor, who it's kind of hard to argue a guy who's a two-way player as opposed to a mostly defense first shortstop. But you've got Joe Sewell and Lou Boudreau also as considered for these honorable mentions. Boy, that's a tough pick, man. You've got Hall of Famers. You got two Hall of Famers and Francisco Lindor, and you pick Omar Vizquel. Omar played so long that his numbers, he almost got to 3,000 hits. He was really good with the bat in that number 2 hole for so long. He's stolen bases. He's up there. But what you think of Omar when you think of first is just being a magician with the glove.
Yeah, his defense really stands out, Joe. But I've got, and I love Omar. Watched him for 11 years. I don't think defensively there was a better shortstop. But Lou Boudreau was a player manager. The last time they won a World Series, and when they won the World Series, Joe, this guy, 355, and he was the MVP of the American League. So there's not much more you can do as a manager when you're a player manager, then you put yourself at shortstop and let yourself go. So it's a tough choice. And Lindor, I kind of forgot about Lindor. I didn't, really kind of put him in the equation, but he was, as soon as he came up, he finished second in the American League in the Rookie of the Year, and he only played a half season. Really, I mean, so that's a tough choice. I think I'd go with Boudreau, though.
Yeah, I mean, here's the one. In terms of what the franchise thinks about their all-time shortstops, Omar Vizquel doesn't have a statue outside in the plaza. Lou Boudreau does. So that ends the debate in my mind right there. And believe me, I loved watching Omar. It made you want to watch defense. It made you want to see the ball get hit on the ground just to see what would happen next, especially when there were runners on base and he had the ability to go around the bag and just the footwork and everything that he could do. But yeah, when you're talking about all time and franchise history, the guy that won a championship and has a statue out on the plaza, I think you go with him first. And we're overlooking Joe Sewell, another guy. He played forever at the shortstop position, and that's hard to do.
Yeah, and he struck out like 10 times, didn't he, his whole career? Something
Absolutely.
Like that.
He was guards ball before there was guards ball. It's kind of amazing there. So yeah, a lot of debate, a lot of decisions to be made there as well. Okay, 3 outfield spots, and again, this is where we see the recency bias sort of show up again. The 3 outfield spots went to Manny Ramirez, Kenny Lofton, and Tris Speaker. Let's start with Tris Speaker because he's the one who I know the very least about. But this is a guy who, when there's black and white photos, I guess he was the 1912 MVP. This was a key piece on the 1920 championship team. Just one of the all-time doubles leaders in Major League Baseball history. What can we say about choosing Tris Speaker as an outfielder?
Yeah, he was a player manager on the 1920 team that won the World Series. They called him the Gray Eagle. He played a real short center field. He dared people to hit it over his head. So, a great player, Joe, in a different era. So and if what are we doing? Are we Speaker versus Lofton, maybe, or is it just?
I don't know, because they put Lofton in right field, which
Yeah.
is where Manny Ramirez played, and they put Ramirez in left field, which kind of didn't make a lot of sense to me. But maybe maybe you load up on multiple center fielders there. You watched Kenny Lofton play center field, 3 different stints in Cleveland, and this was a guy who was electric on the bases, stolen bases. I think he led the league for 5 consecutive seasons and is the all-time steals leader by a lot in Cleveland. What did you think of Kenny Lofton being a pick here as far as, both sides of the ball?
I think you've got to put Lofton in there. Obviously, I think he should be in the Hall of Fame, but I think he's got to be one of your starting 3 outfielders on your all-time Cleveland team, and I'd put him in center field and forget about it, Joe. I'd just run him out there every day.
Yeah. You also watched Manny Ramirez and the absolute joyride that it was watching him play the outfield and run the bases. But, when all is said and done, this is probably one of the greatest right-handed hitters in not just Cleveland franchise history, but in Major League history.
Yeah, no doubt about it. He really, a really good hitter. In the later years, it looked like he had a little help, artificial help. I mean, he got caught too many times. Another guy that should be in the Hall of Fame, but is probably never going to make it. But, it's hard to overlook that raw talent at the plate, Joe. When he came up, I don't think he needed any help. He's the best right-handed hitter I've seen. A power average. The only guy I might consider other than Manny was Rocky Colavito in right field. Pure home run hitter, great arm, better arm than Manny. So those are probably the 2 guys I'd consider.
Yeah, and surprisingly, Fox Sports left Colavito off this list. He wasn't there. However, some of the old-timer type players, Elmer Flick was mentioned there, Charlie Jameson, Earl Averill were honorable mentions, as well as Larry Doby. And I think one of the things you have to consider with Larry Doby, not just that he was a tremendous player, and the value that he brought in the outfield, but what he meant to baseball and to the franchise, and the transformative qualities of Larry Doby as a player, as a person, I think also need to be considered in that regard. Might not put him in the mix to be in the starting lineup in the top 3, but certainly worthy of consideration there. What'd you think of guys like Averill, Doby, Jameson as being honorable mentions there?
Yeah, I think Doby obviously, helped them win the World Series. I think he was mostly a center fielder, Joe, right? I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, so and I know when he came up, I think he had to maybe, I don't know if he was playing the infield or he had to learn a new position or something. But when he broke the color barrier in the American League. But yeah, I thought, he was mostly a center fielder, so you got to put him there. But yeah, and the other guys, were kind of, I really don't know too much about him. Jameson is in the Hall of Fame, right? I think he
Yeah,
just.
Jameson's in the Hall of Fame. These are, and I think you got to pretty much consider anybody who's in the Hall of Fame for this list. It has to be an honorable mentions. As far as the designated hitter position goes, this is a fun one because Albert Bell, I think, probably, for a stretch, if you're just talking pure offense, Albert Bell was the man in the 90s, not just for Cleveland. He was one of the best hitters overall in the 90s in terms of RBIs, in terms of doubles, in terms of home runs. I think only Frank Thomas, stands ahead of him during that time period. And definitely one of the most intimidating and feared hitters of all time. They put him at DH, but Albert was made himself into a pretty decent defensive left fielder. Could play the wall pretty well and had a decent arm. You have him on this list. Travis Hafner, Michael Brantley, and Thunder, Andre Thornton, the other honorable mentions at DH. Any debate there for you?
Yeah, I would. I don't know how Albert would have handled just DHing. I think he would.
Probably not well.
Yeah, I'd have to play Albert every day in left field, I think, just to keep him motivated and out of the dugout and keep all the furniture and stuff safe in the locker room. So I would think, Albert, and he wasn't a bad left fielder. He did okay. He wasn't a Gold Glove, but he was okay in left field. So I think Albert. But when I think of DHs, I probably pure DHs. I'd have to go with Andre Thornton. That was, Thunder was, he was kind of past it. He wasn't the first baseman anymore, but he was, the DH. He had the knee problems, but boy, could he hit when he was on. The same with Hafner too. But Thornton kind of jumps out of it.
Yeah, Thornton. To me, when I think DH, I think Andre Thornton in Cleveland for sure. As far as that goes. Okay, the last spot that they picked on this list was the all-time manager, and this one probably another hard choice between the guys that they had considered. They gave the nod to Terry Francona, the franchise all-time leader in wins, the longest tenured, 11. Lou Boudreau, again considered as manager. Obviously, you're a player manager. You win the World Series, you got to be considered. But Mike Hargrove, the guy who sort of managed them through 2 World Series appearances and those great these runs into the postseason. What do you think about the debate there as far as the Cleveland all-time manager?
Wow, that's a tough one right there. Grover gets you to what? I think that they win 5, 6 division titles, 2 World Series. 100. The breakout year in '95 where they finally make it back to the World Series. Just, I thought he did a great job with a really talented but a difficult team to handle. I mean, that was a team of a lot of personalities, and they didn't mind speaking their mind. So, I thought Grover did a great job with that team. I thought, but I'll probably go with Francona though. I think he kind of helped revive the organization when they came out. When he took over for Manny Acta, who took over for Wedge, and really kind of brought them back and really made them a consistent winner. Now, he only went to 1 World Series, and, they lost it in Game 7. So, that kind of, that's really a tough choice. I'll go with Francona right now.
Yeah, and like we said, recency bias plays a huge role in this list. But again, I'm going with the guy whose statue's out front, man. You can't really argue that. He won a title, and the franchise thought so much of him that they built a statue. That's Lou Boudreau. All right, Hoynes, this was fun. This was a good way to sort of break up the season, discuss some of the all-time greats in Cleveland. And if you're listening, if you're watching, jump on Subtext and shoot us your picks for some of these spots and tell us, your choices. You can go to cleveland.com/subtext and sign up and text back and forth with Hoynes and with me all season long. $3.99 a month to subscribe. All right, Hoynes, that's going to wrap up today's edition of the Cleveland Baseball Talk podcast. We'll be back